And it actually is a mix that we see just anecdotally. So under our evidence-based falls prevention programs that we offer anywhere, we actually get a lot of people who come because they said their friend took the class, one of our classes, whether it's a matter of balance, bingo size, or enhanced fitness. Their friend took the class, said they had a great time. They can't believe they actually had fun talking about falls for 8 weeks. And their friend suggested it. They've never had a fall, but they just thought it might be a fun thing to do. And then, of course, on the flip side, we do have those people that do come to us after they've experienced the fall, they've broken a limb or experienced a serious injury, and they don't want it to happen again.
The U.S. Senate Special Committee on Aging will now come to order. Every year, more than 14 million older Americans experience a fall. Many of them end up in emergency rooms across our great country. Many seniors never recover and lose the independence they spent a lifetime building. Falls are the leading cause of injury, injury-related hospitalization, and injury-related death for Americans over the age of 65. This isn't something we should ever accept as an inevitable statistic. It's a crisis we need to resolve. The numbers behind this crisis are staggering. Non-fatal medical spending related to falls among older adults reached approximately $80 billion in 2020. With Medicare bearing the majority of that cost, and as our population continues to age, that number will only rise unless our country wakes up and addresses this issue head on. We're talking about tens of billions of dollars spent treating injuries that in many cases were preventable. As bad as those numbers are, it's much more than the budget. Every single one of those cases is an individual. This is a grandfather in Florida who breaks his hip and never returns to his home. It's about someone's grandmother who falls alone and waits hours before anyone finds her. It's about families who worry if they're getting the call every time the phone rings. Falls don't just injure people physically, they take an emotional toll, create fear, increase isolation, and cause a loss of confidence that accelerates decline. Once the senior stops moving, stops going out, and stops engaging with their community, the consequences begin to compound. That's because none of us were put on this earth to sit alone and stare out the window. We need family, we need friends, hobbies, purpose. Those things are what make life worth living. The good news is that nobody has to just accept this fate. There are solutions on the rise across the country. Our incredible area agencies on aging are on the front lines, delivering programs at work, strength and balance training, home safety assessments, and medication reviews that identify high-risk drug combinations before they cause a fall are just a glimpse of what these organizations can do. These are all proven interventions that save lives and help keep overall costs down. I'm thankful for the work of the Administration for Community Living and the role the whole agency plays in supporting and scaling these efforts through a nationwide network of state and local partners. The work the ACL and the AAs do together is exactly the kind of federal investment that pays for itself many times over. That's why I'm proud to be leading the reauthorization of the Older Americans Act with Ranking Member Gillibrand, Chairman Cassidy, and Ranking Member Sanders. Alongside these OAA programs, technology is opening new doors we have never had before. Remote monitoring systems, fall detection sensors, predictive analytics, and smart home platforms are changing what is possible in fall prevention and emergency response. When a senior falls and no one is home, every minute matters. Technology is cutting response times, reducing long-term complications, and giving families everywhere peace of mind. Let me direct. The Older American Act is a foundational law governing community-based services for older Americans, and it's far past time Congress actually reauthorizes it. This hearing is an opportunity to continue building the record, documenting what is working, and identifying where gaps exist given the lapse in OAA reauthorization. I want to thank our witnesses for taking the time to be here and for the work they do every day on behalf of older Americans. And now I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Gillibrand for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate all our witnesses. Every year, an estimated 1 in 4 adults will fall, which can result in injury, hospitalization, and even death. Today's hearing explores the role technology and innovation can play in senior safety. For example, smartphone apps can assess an older adult's fall risk. In-home sensors can alert caregivers when a loved one falls. Wearable devices can even cushion the blow of a fall. Before today's hearing, I worked with Senators King and Kim to ask the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, to report on new technologies that provide promise in helping our older adults and people with disabilities live safely and independently. We also asked GAO to examine the challenges older adults face with adopting such new technologies. We know these challenges are real. For example, technology is expensive. AI can be biased. Communities can lack high-speed internet access. There's promise in technology, but its promise does have limits. This means we cannot stop investing in programs that have proven track record of working. This includes federal fall prevention programs authorized by the Older American Act, delivered through the Administration of Community Living, as well as the programs afforded by CDC and HUD. Finally, we need to remember how much technology and innovation is built upon federally funded research. I look forward to hearing more about the opportunity that this emerging technology plays in keeping our seniors safe, as well as the role of our current successful falls prevention program. And I would just personally say, is I've watched how falls affected my own family members. When my grandmother, my great-grandmother fell and broke her hip, which is the story every time, it took a lot of work, effort, using the walker. Using the walker, sometimes you don't graduate from the walker because you never have that confidence again. Another one of my friends in her 90s, she recently fell. It kept her indoors for 2 months until she was fully recovered and could be back on the sidewalks where they're uneven and where her eyesight is just not strong enough to catch those uneven surfaces. When my mother-in-law fell, she had such a serious shoulder injury. It took 3 surgeries to fix it. So I personally know the tragedies and complexities that arise because of falls. And they are life-changing. Sometimes your loved one does not regain their capability that they had before the fall. Sometimes the psychological impact of the fall restricts their movement, restricts their ambition, restricts their willingness to travel or explore. It reduces the size of their world. It changes their confidence level. It can affect them emotionally and physically and psychologically. So personally, I know how urgent and important this is, so I'm very eager to hear your solutions.
Thank you, Ranking Member. Now, for our first witness, I'd like to introduce Christine Didion from my home state of Florida. She is the Director of Programs at the Area Agency on Aging, Pasco Pinellas in St. Petersburg, Florida. She has dedicated her career to connecting older adults in our communities with the services and support they need to stay safe, healthy, and independent at home. Thank you for being here today, and please begin your testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Gillibrand, and distinguished members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. I'm honored to represent my colleagues, our partners, and the work we do at the Area Agency on Aging of Pasco Pinellas in St. Petersburg, Florida. It is a distinct privilege to advocate on behalf of the thousands of seniors and caregivers we serve and to speak on this vital topic that impacts 1 in 4 Americans age 65 and older each year. If I were to ask you what your plans are for your golden years, most of us are not making plans to limit our activities because we will have a fear of falling, or worse, making plans on how we are going to care for ourselves after experiencing a fall that results in a serious injury. Unfortunately, the stark reality of falls and the reverberating impacts suggests that maybe we should be making these plans. More than 14 million older adults report experiencing a fall each year, and falls remain the leading cause of fatal and non-fatal injuries among older adults. $80 billion in healthcare costs were estimated to be spent in 2020 on the treatment of non-fatal injuries from a fall among older adults, with an estimated 71% of those costs paid for by Medicare or Medicaid. That cost is expected to rise to $101 billion by 2030. Even if an older adult never experiences a fall, the fear of falling still exists for a majority of those over the age of 65. A fear of falling can lead to an avoidance of physical activities, functional limitations, and increases in social isolation. This can all compound to reduce an older adult's quality of life and impact their ability to live well and independently. Through the Older Americans Act, or OAA, older adults and communities are not powerless against the growing impacts of falls and the fear of falling. For more than 50 years, the OAA has represented the national commitment to assisting older adults to age at home and is the cornerstone of the nation's non-Medicaid home and community-based services system. Each year, through the OAA, more than 14 million older Americans receive supportive services from the nationwide aging network, which consists of state units on aging, area agencies on aging, Title VI Native American aging programs, and thousands of local service providers. The OAA provides a wide array of home and community-based services that address the social determinants of health and supports evidence-based falls prevention programs and safety technology. The Area Agency on Aging of Pasco-Pinellas, with OAA funds that are contracted through the Florida Department of Elder Affairs, has forged over 61 public-private partnerships to provide the evidence-based falls prevention programs of A Matter of Balance, Bingo Size, and Enhanced Fitness to over 753 older adults over the last year. Because of our partnerships with residential communities, our local hospital systems, local YMCA branch, senior centers, and libraries, we are meeting older adults where they are in the community and equipping them with more than just a few tips on how to reduce falls. These programs are proven to empower older adults to reduce their fear of falling, increase their coordination and balance, engage in strength training or other physical activity, and build environmental awareness. These outcomes prevent falls from happening, and these prevented falls yield an estimated savings of over $1 billion in healthcare costs. While the work to prevent falls will continue, we must also work to reduce the long lie, or the time an older adult remains on the floor after a fall. OAA funding can provide wearable emergency alert response and fall detection technology that allows for 24/7 monitoring and emergency assistance at the detection of a fall or the press of a button. In West Central Florida, over a quarter of older adults live alone and are often far away from family. Beyond dispatching emergency services, this technology keeps remote families informed in real time. A recent activation in our area allowed a daughter to coordinate directly with paramedics and provide vital medical history after her mother, who lives alone, had fallen. This technology has been able to transform potentially fatal isolation into a connected, responsive network that supports the independence of older adults. Falls do not have to be an inevitable part of aging. They can be a preventable health event using existing and proven interventions. The reauthorization and adequate funding of the Older Americans Act gives Congress the opportunity to ensure that the more than 600 area agencies on aging that serve every area of the United States can continue to provide evidence-based falls prevention programs and safety technology that is cost-effective and community-focused. Not only will this reduce the risk of falls, but it will increase the overall wellness of older adults to live well where they choose to and alleviate fall-related injury costs on an already strained healthcare system. I thank Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Gillibrand, and the members of this committee for their leadership and support of a reauthorized Older Americans Act to continue to help older adults live well. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, I'd like to introduce Laura Mitchell, co-founder and CEO of Grand Care Systems based in San Marcos, California. She is a nationally recognized leader in aging technology and remote monitoring, and Grand Care has been at the forefront of aging technology platforms that help older adults and their caregivers manage health, safety, and communication from home. Thank you for being here. It's a long way, and please begin your testimony.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Laura Mitchell. I'm the CEO of Grand Care Systems, an assistive technology that empowers independence using touchscreens for communication and integrated activity and telehealth sensors. It's truly an honor to be with you here today. I'd like to start my testimony with a true story about Jean, one of our Grand Care clients from Florida. At the age of 75, Jean experienced her first petit mal seizure. Her daughter didn't know until 4 critical hours later, when she found her mom confused and disoriented. Doctors advised assisted living as her only option. But Jean wanted to stay home, and instead she began to use Grand Care. Using simple motion sensors, the system tracked her daily patterns and could alert her daughter if something seemed off, like wandering or inactivity. It also tracked her blood pressure and reminded her when to take her medications. Jean stayed in her home for another 4 years until something shifted. She became agitated. She wasn't sleeping, and she showed signs of sundowners. Now, typically, that might lead to additional medications and maybe even a diagnosis that could alter Jean's life. But Jean's daughter, Carol, had data. Using Grand Care's motion reports, she was able to pinpoint exactly when Jean's behavior changed. She brought that information to the doctor, and together they saw that this change aligned perfectly when Jean's blood pressure medication changed. They switched the medication, the symptoms disappeared. Think about that for just a minute. Without this technology, Jean could have been treated for the wrong condition, medicated unnecessarily, or even prematurely forced into a higher level of care. Instead, she remained home for an additional 2 years. Due to the power of proactive, data-driven care, Jean stayed in her own home beyond the initial diagnosis for over 6 years, saving her family over $180,000. When people think about falls, we picture Help by Falling and I Can't Get Up, a commercial that actually aired almost 40 years ago. And while falls are absolutely serious, they're not the root problem, they're merely a symptom. Studies have shown that falls can be caused by things like medication noncompliance, dehydration, or other underlying health issues. By the time a fall occurs, we're already in crisis mode, and the outcomes, like we said, can be devastating. So we have to ask ourselves, why are we still waiting for the fall? Why should technology activate only after something goes wrong? The good news is, today we have technology tools to shift from reactive to proactive, predictive, and preventative care. Imagine a simple tablet in the home, something accessible and empowering. It reminds mom to take her medications, to drink more water, to take her blood pressure reading. Meanwhile, unobtrusive smart home sensors are working quietly. They can recognize when something seems amiss, like the kitchen hasn't been accessed at mealtime, medications weren't taken, or if mom's vitals are out of threshold. And only then, only when true support is actually needed, will it notify a designated caregiver. This isn't about surveillance, it's about independence, it's about connection to family and giving older adults the confidence and security to live where they want, while ensuring someone is there whenever needed. Access to this type of technology isn't a luxury, it's a moral obligation deserved, regardless of age or cognitive function. Through simple video chat, messaging, and even brain games, individuals can stay engaged and mentally acute. Technology doesn't isolate, it connects. Beyond the improved happiness, health, and safety outcomes that technology provides, it also saves a lot of money. The cost of this technology compares to a mere 15 days in an average assisted living community. It's 15 days. Now, not every person has the option to stay home, but if technology can support one person to delay additional care, they can save roughly $50,000 a year. But it's not only saving money. It's about preserving dad's dignity, securing independence for mom. It's about adult children having peace of mind. It's about taking care of our parents and our loved ones when they need us the most. Now we are at a turning point. Our nation is in an aging crisis exacerbated by staffing shortages and high health care. We cannot solve tomorrow's challenges with yesterday's tools. Let's move beyond crisis management and turn to proactive and person-centered technology. It's time to reimagine aging in America, not as a loss of independence, but as an opportunity for personal growth, purpose, and the ability for our greatest generation to live life on their own terms. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Next, I'd like to introduce Martha Petties. She is the Director of Grant Management and Health Strategies for the Alliance of New York State YMCAs. She oversees statewide implementation and scaling of evidence-based chronic disease prevention programs to reduce fall risk and lower long-term healthcare costs for seniors. Thank you for being here. Please begin your testimony.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Gillibrand, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify on this important topic. I am here on behalf of the 35 YMCA associations and over 140 branches and program sites across the state of New York. In my role as Director of Grant Management and Health Strategies at the Alliance of New York State YMCAs, I support Ys with healthy aging initiatives, community partnerships, and evidence-based programs that strengthen health and well-being across the lifespan. For 175 years, YMCAs have been dedicated to strengthening communities through youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. As the largest provider of after-school programming in New York State, YMCAs also support communities through early childhood education, food access, housing, and life-saving swim instruction. This broad community presence allows WISE to support older adults through programs that promote healthy aging, independence, and well-being. As this committee examines the role of technology, community programs, and innovation in senior safety, the WISE experience delivering both in-person and statewide virtual falls prevention programs demonstrates that technology can be a powerful tool to expand access for older adults facing barriers such as transportation, mobility, or isolation. At the same time, we have learned technology is most effective when paired with trusted community-based relationships and local support. Falls remain the leading cause of injury and accident-related deaths for adults over the age of 65. According to the CDC, 1 in 4 adults reports falling every year. Falls are devastating for individuals and families and are a major driver of long-term health costs. But now for the good news. Falls are not a normal part of aging. They are preventable, and proven evidence-based falls prevention programs like those offered every day at YMCAs are changing stories for people like Marianne. Fear of falling kept Marianne isolated in her New York City apartment, afraid to venture outside onto busy city streets with her walker. But Marianne took a virtual A Matter of Balance class. She learned strategies to reduce falls risk in her home and exercises to improve her strength and balance. Through the virtual class, she also found encouragement, connection, and confidence. The Alliance of New York State YMCAs is currently managing an administration for community living grant awarded to the New York State YMCA Foundation to support a statewide falls prevention initiative. The initiative both complements and expands the YMCA's broader healthy aging work. Through technology and ACL funding support, WISE have reached more older adults than would have been possible through traditional in-person programming alone, particularly in rural, underserved, and homebound communities. In just 2 years, more than 1,000 people have participated in falls prevention programs through this initiative. In addition to falls prevention programming, YMCAs have long partnered with federal, state, and local health organizations to deliver evidence-based programs that support chronic disease prevention, arthritis management, cancer survivorship, diabetes prevention, and healthy aging. We urge Congress to support the highest level of funding possible for the CDC so WISE can continue to deliver these supportive programs and to preserve funding for the ACL so community-based healthy aging and falls prevention programs like the New York State Initiative can continue. Every dollar invested in community-based organizations like the YMCA create lasting impact and strengthens the health of communities. Federal investment in prevention help older adults remain independent, connected, and healthier longer. They are investments in dignity, healthier communities, and changing stories for people like Marianne. New York State YMCAs look forward to continuing this critical work in communities across the state. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify and for the work of this committee on the behalf of older adults.
Thank each of you for your testimony, and I think we're going to turn it over to Senator King. Welcome to the Aging Committee.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I appreciate your accommodating me. I'm sort of halfway between a witness and a senator today. I'm not a normal member of this committee, but this is an issue I've taken a deep interest in. As the chairman, as all of us know, one of the principal problems facing our society today is the high cost of health care. And prevention is the low-hanging fruit to combat the high cost of health care. The cheapest health intervention is the one that doesn't have to happen. And that's why I think this hearing is so important, because as you've testified, falls are a tremendously important and significant and dangerous part of the aging process, but they can be prevented. I've done my own falls prevention work by selling my Harley a couple of years ago, which was a very hard decision, but I had an attack of prudence. My second thought is an old friend of mine once said, the secret to a long life is to always use the banister. And that's something that I follow all the time. And that sounds funny, but it's really true. And how many times have we gone down the steps with our hand on the banister and one foot sort of slips? And if you don't have that banister, you're in trouble. The steps behind the U.S. Senate where they always take the pictures are a death trap. They're granite and there's no banister. So I have a couple of suggestions along this line. One is this. This is an $11 bath mat. I'm the Johnny Appleseed of bath mats. Whenever I go to see somebody and they don't have one of these in their shower, I buy one and send it to them. Now, here's the proposal, though. Why doesn't CMS send one of these to every Medicare recipient in the country? I did the back of the envelope calculation. It would pay for itself in about 9 months. This is $11. I suspect if CMS bought them by the millions, they could get a deal. And it would have a noticeable effect on the number of falls. A very simple idea. Along with that is, and I have some legislation along this line, allow CMS to spend money on prevention things like grab bars and bath mats. Right now, Medicare will pay for a broken hip, but they won't pay for a grab bar in your shower. That's just insane. And so I think, Mr. Chairman, that's one of the things we need to do is authorize Medicare to get much more active in the prevention area and to provide things like this. I mean, I'm not kidding. Send out 20 or 30 million of these, and you'll see that $100 million cost of falls fall significantly. I'm proposing that we should have an office in HHS dedicated to falls prevention, and one in the Veterans Administration. The initial Medicare home visit should include an analysis of the house in terms of fall risks. Medicaid, as I mentioned, should cover, or Medicare, rather, should cover equipment like grab bars, bath mats, and others. There should be a tax credit, I believe, for home improvements that prevent these kinds of injuries. And again, this would be a tax credit that paid for itself because of the savings to Medicare and Medicaid that are occasioned by treatment of falls. And finally, Mr. Chair, I suggest right now the Congressional Budget Office, when we legislate things, the Congressional Budget Office estimates costs, but they're not allowed under their rules to estimate projected savings. So I believe we should instruct the Congressional Budget Office to look at the savings as well as the cost of these kinds of preventive measures. So you all have nodded. Could you all say yes, Senator King? You have some good ideas here, just for the record. But I'm very passionate about this because all of us have experienced falls. My sister had a bad fall just about a year ago, and if she'd had a bath mat, she wouldn't have had that fall in the shower. And a disproportionate number of these falls occur in the bathroom. And so that's why something like this, I think, makes sense. So, Mr. Chairman, I deeply appreciate your allowing me to come and testify today. And hope that I look forward to working with the committee on some of these legislative proposals that I think can really make a significant difference. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Those are good ideas. You know, if you were in business, you clearly do it, right? Because I mean, you could save money, and everybody's better off. Like why we don't do this in government doesn't make
The
any
return
sense.
on investment is infinite.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, it makes people's lives better too. On top of that, Senator Kim.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Senator King, for those thoughts there. I mean, I think it's absolutely critical and important for us to be thinking so much more about the preventative space. You know, I've shared a lot in this committee as well as more broadly in Senate about how my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's last year, but what I don't talk as much about is what initially caused this crisis that we're dealing with him is that he fell, and he's somebody that broke his femur and was originally sent to the hospital that way, and it was that kind of change in location and the surgery and the medication involved that very much spurred his cognitive decline as well. And we're kind of in this doom loop right now as a family because he cannot walk, but he cannot remember that he cannot walk. and constantly stands up and falls, and constantly stands up, falls, goes back to the hospital. And we now, have sensors within his room to let us know when he's trying to stand up. We have sensors that let us know if he's on the ground. So this technology is something that I am using in my father's room right now while I'm here, to try to help make sure that we are understanding of his fall risk, as well as be able to quickly remedy. I have an app that lets me know, whether or not any of these sensors have been triggered. So, I just share that with you, is like I feel it and see it in my own way. And, I'm interested in trying to figure this out more deeply. So, Ms. Didion, if you don't mind, I'd like to just start with you. Can you share how access to fall prevention technology could have an impact on a family's considerations, whether that they're weighing, long-term care facility or care at home, and what's the better option? How is this technology now being utilized to help people make those types of decisions?
Absolutely. And thank you, Senator Kim, for sharing that story about your father. Because you're right, technology can really make a difference for a senior or an older adult being able to remain in their own home. And we know that a vast majority of older adults want to remain in their own home or want to remain with family. Living with family, or are living with a memory condition or other chronic condition that otherwise they wouldn't be able to live alone without that support of a caregiver or family. And technology can only leverage the time, effort, and care that a caregiver or family can provide to a senior, or leverage that additional independence for a senior to live on their own. Like I mentioned, in West Central Florida, a quarter of older adults live alone, and we often see in Florida that they're not living anywhere near their family. Their family lives up north, my colleague's state of New York, or all over. And that's the great thing about emergency alert response technology, is a family or caregiver or whoever does not have to live in the same home. They don't have to live on the same street. They could live in a different state. Like I mentioned in my testimony, the daughter who got the call about her mom who had fallen, she actually lived in a completely different state. She lived on the different coast in California, actually. But she was able to be connected right away. So not only are emergency services able to be contacted, but caregivers or other loved ones can be contacted too. And it can really set up that step process to maybe emergency services don't need to be called. Maybe just a caregiver who does happen to live by just needs to come over and check on that person. So you may be eliminating a trip to the emergency room after all, even with emergency technology.
Yeah, and I find that it just allows me to operate without this constant anxiety of wondering whether he's okay at any given moment, having to check in and that kind of vein. And it just gives that reassurance that I think, allows for caregivers when they're away to have that respite that they absolutely need, in addition to just, hopefully, proceeding in other ways. Ms. Mitchell, I wanted to turn to you because I think what I find interesting here is that there's a lot of potential here, the potential dual applications that this technology can be used for, with both older adults as well as with people with disabilities. And I just feel like, as we're thinking through how to be able to harness this, that is something that we can potentially build upon. But I wanted to kind of get your thoughts about that potential there.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, I think that individuals living with intellectual and developmental disabilities have a pretty high fall risk as well. I think that it's in the 25 to 33% for adults 65 plus. It's about 35 to 40% in adults living with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But then when we're talking about adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities that are 65 plus, it goes up to the highest risks of 45 to 70%. So the good news is people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are living longer than ever, and that's great. But we do have some added fall risks because of balance issues and gait issues. So I think that technology can play a pivotal role in not only supporting that individual to proactively sort of prevent the fall with, reminders, drink more water, take your blood pressure medication, whatever medications they're taking, but also take your vitals readings. So there's lots of different ways that we can determine before a fall occurs. Of course, there's accessibility things. We've got the bath mat, we've got banisters. I definitely agree with that. But then, how do we prevent the fall? But then if a fall does occur, it's critical that we know right away. So maybe we're detecting excessive motion in the bathroom. Maybe we're detecting that, hey, this person didn't get up and get out of bed, or we're detecting that that person didn't access the fridge at mealtime. All of these different checkpoints that are just sort of notifying us that something may be wrong.
Yeah. I'm going to go right away and get a bath mat for my own. Oh, yeah? Yeah, okay. Well, I'm making progress here on this.
Should you bring one for everyone?
There, who's, I know. My wife can no longer say that I don't get any benefit out of this job. But the last thing I'll just say here is the question now is like, how do we scale this? How do we try to actually proliferate this in a meaningful way? Because I'll be honest, it was hard for me to explain and convince my dad that these sensors are okay, or even for me, I didn't even know about this. I needed someone to tell me about this. I'm busy with my life, and I don't always have the latest understanding of where the technology is. And as Senator King was mentioning, I think government can play a big role in trying to scale this. So it's not just sort of a case by case type of situation. So I guess I just wanted to ask you, Ms. Mitchell, as I close out here, just what is the role of the federal government? What should we be considering about, not only in terms of knowing about this technology, but how we might be able to play a role to be able to proliferate this and get this into the hands of many more people that could very well benefit from it?
Yeah, so I think reimbursements and waivers play a pivotal role. There seem to be a little bit more reimbursements going on the Medicaid side of things for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, more so than Medicare. I think that's really too bad, because I think the government should actually proactively support this type of technology. It's clearly less expensive than the cost of hands-on caregiving, and we are at such a need for hands-on caregiving that individuals that actually don't need it 24/7, we're wasting an individual that may be staying overnight and watching Netflix or sleeping while this person is also sleeping. And instead, that individual could be delegated to somewhere where somebody actually really needs that 24/7 hands-on support. So I think that if government put some money towards this type of proactive technology, it would not only save, everybody money, the cost of healthcare. If someone's healthier, it's going to save money. If someone's happier, it's going to save money. If someone is less isolated, they're at a much less risk for falls and all sorts of other bad outcomes. So when you mentioned your father maybe not being willing to try out this type of technology, I think there are some ways that we can get around that. So that's why we have the technology that helps connect individuals. For the story I told you about with Jean, she was the one who contacted us in 2005 and asked for us to do the technology in her home, and asked if we would please call her daughter Carol and convince her that she could do it. And the reason is she said, I need Carol to live her own life. She is calling me constantly, and I want her to live her own life. She also wanted to stay independent at home. She was a swimmer. She grew orchids in her kitchen. She was not ready for assisted living. And so it was that need for independence and the desire for her daughter to be notified if something was wrong, but having that independence where she wasn't going to have her daughter be contacting her every minute of the day just to check in. So there was some technology that was playing that role, and it allowed her daughter to actually spend that time with her mom and being her daughter, not being her caregiver, but being her daughter, because she knew what was happening in the home and she didn't have to spend time talking about it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Senator King, Senator Kim. Thank you both. Senator Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of y'all for being here. It was a big-time honor for me to introduce this bill and be a part of that and everything in every way. I've got a confession to make. There's 3 ways in the world you can make a friend. You can ask a favor, make a confession, or tell a secret. Now think about that and carry that with you in your life. Make a confession, ask a favor, tell a secret. Well, I'm going to make a confession and tell a secret right now. First of all, folks that some way grow older, we don't really believe that we're older for a long time, and all of a sudden, I still think I'm 25 years old. And I've climbed every mountain. I've followed every bird dog in the world all over Kingdom Come. I've loved to hunt and fish and play golf and do everything in the world. And I'm kind of broke up now because I was too slow to get out of the way and I got hit a lot. But with all that being said, let me just tell you just this. This past basketball season, I'm the girls' high school basketball coach at Greenbrier East High School. Public school, big school, and everything. And my team just happened to be really rolling along, and all of a sudden, we're in the quarterfinals of the state tournament. And we win. And now we're going to the Final Four. And if I could fast forward, we finished, we won it. We won the whole state championship, and we ended up 27-0 on the season. So they're a pretty good team. In fact, they're an incredible team, to tell you the truth, and great, great kids. But after the quarterfinal game, you go into this room where all the media's there, all the cameras and everything, and they tell us, then you go up on a platform, and you're sitting there with probably 3 of your players and everything that they want to interview, and they want to talk to you too. And so I'm sitting there and everything, and they tell us that when we go in the room, watch all these wires now right here and everything, because just maybe you could fall, trip over that and everything. And so I get through all the wires, I'm on the stage, everything's all good in the world. You remember, I don't think I'm 75 years old. And at that time, really, I was still 74 years old. But the next thing I come off that stage, and the next thing I know, I'm flying through the air. And I'm going just like this, and I face plant right in the floor. I dislocate my shoulder, and I hit right on a knee that's had so many surgeries, it's unbelievable. And it was a really, really bad day, And I can tell you just this, that since that time now, I'm 3 times more disabled than I was right before that happened. Now, I need 2 knee replacements, and I need a hip replacement and all that, and I've got to get all that done. And I hope to goodness after that happens that things will be better. But let me tell you, not long ago, there's a group of physical therapists that I met with, and they told me about this incredible, incredible idea. Safe Act. I thought, well, what in the world is Safe Act? And, we went through all the different stuff, and then lo and behold, all of a sudden, they said something that at the time maybe didn't mean near as much to me as it means today. And that is a way to improve potential balance and a way to avoid falls. Because we all know that as we age, $80 billion a year. Are you kidding me? I just came out of the Ag Committee meeting, and really and truly, we're scrambling around trying to figure out how we could have X number of dollars because our farm community is upside down and we're hurting like you can't imagine. So with all that being said, $80 billion attributed to falls in this country, and this is our opportunity, and this is our moment, our moment's right now, to do something that really and truly, a lot of us, as we grew a little bit older, we never really would have believed that it would be us. But as I was flying through the air, believe me, B, I knew it was us, and I was the us. But so I commend you in every way. I really only have one question, and basically it's just this, that, and maybe this is to Miss Didion, and that would be just in your work, how many people show up after they've had to fall versus how many show up trying to prevent the fall?
That's a great question, Senator. And it actually is a mix that we see just anecdotally. So under our evidence-based falls prevention programs that we offer anywhere, we actually get a lot of people who come because they said their friend took the class, one of our classes, whether it's a matter of balance, bingo size, or enhanced fitness. Their friend took the class, said they had a great time. They can't believe they actually had fun talking about falls for 8 weeks. And their friend suggested it. They've never had a fall, but they just thought it might be a fun thing to do. And then, of course, on the flip side, we do have those people that do come to us after they've experienced the fall, they've broken a limb or experienced a serious injury, and they don't want it to happen again. And either or, we don't care how you came to the Area Agency on Aging to take an evidence-based falls prevention class or access any of the support services that the Older Americans Act can provide to keep a senior in their home. We just want to keep a senior in their home as safe as possible.
Well, I commend you. Keep doing the great work. And we've got to get this across the finish line because this is really, really, really important. And maybe it took hard-headedness for me to believe, but I believe, I'll promise you that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry. Polypharmacy is one of the most overlooked fall risk factors we have. How often are you seeing older adults coming into your programs who are on drug combinations that nobody has flagged as dangerous? And do the AAAs have the resources and clinical support to address that systematically?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. We do see that a lot. And as you said, one of the biggest fall risks or risk for causing a fall is living with a chronic condition and being on multiple different medications that can have side effects like dizziness or confusion that can increase the chance for a fall. We do see that a lot with older adults that we serve, but that's the great thing about especially a matter of balance class that can be offered with funding from the Older Americans Act, because we can address or empower an older adult to advocate for themselves or learn how to advocate with their family to talk to their doctor about their different medications or different treatment options for their chronic conditions. Because the other great thing about the Older Americans Act is we don't just offer evidence-based classes for falls prevention. We're able to offer evidence-based classes that address chronic conditions like living with diabetes, chronic pain, or just general chronic conditions, and teaching older adults how to self-manage those. And that includes looking at their medications and asking the right questions with their doctor about what kind of medications they're on. And then on the other side, again, on the Older Americans Act, it's really looking at that holistically of how we can prevent falls. And the Older Americans Act really allows area agencies on aging and state units on aging and those local service providers to do that, because we can address other factors and chronic conditions that can help prevent falls, like meals, and again, those emergency alert response technology systems.
Thank you. Ms. Mitchell, you've been building aging technology for quite a while, which means you've watched a lot of promising products fail to scale or fail to reach the people who need them most. What is the single biggest structural barrier preventing fall prevention technology from achieving widespread adoption among older adults? And is it a funding problem, a reimbursement problem, or something else entirely?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a couple things. First, I think funding is definitely a problem. I would say the biggest problem, though, might be internet connectivity. And that sounds crazy because internet's been around since the 90s, but it is especially access to this type of telehealth or telemedicine or activity of daily living monitoring technologies. You need internet for it to function. And particularly in remote areas, it's great for them to have internet connectivity, which is where it's the hardest to get internet. So I think it's a twofold funding for this type of technology, also funding for internet connectivity, and sort of turning that into more of a utility versus a nice to have, because it's really a need to have. And then also really about awareness, letting individuals know that this is a technology that works. There's a return on investment. It's proven. It's not new. So, I mean, the 40-year ago, help I fall and I can't get up, a lot of changes have been made since then. And that is a great piece to have, that complementary piece of crisis management. But for the proactive preventative technology is really where we're going to save the money.
You know what's frustrating is the federal government has spent a fortune to do broadband, but it doesn't pay to connect the home. It just pays to lay the fiber. And so fortunately now with satellite technology, we don't have to rely on that. But don't worry, we're still spending the money. Ms. Pettis, the YMCA's evidence-based fall prevention programs have strong outcome data behind them. What does the research actually show in terms of fall rate reduction, and why hasn't evidence been sufficient to drive the kind of federal investment and reimbursement these programs have earned? You know what doesn't make sense to me is Medicare Advantage, because you don't have to worry about a federal law. Is like, are the Medicare Advantage players doing this because they have an economic interest in doing it? It's just
Unfortunately, no. Yeah. I'd love to talk to you about the return on investment and exactly this point. We talked already about 1 in 4 older adults will experience a fall every year. Of those falls, more than half will result in a trip to the hospital. So if we could talk about what that means in money terms, the average ER visit for a fall is over $1,000. The average inpatient trip for a falls is over $18,000. The cost for an individual to take a virtual A Matter of Balance program, $250. So according to a recent study by the National Council on Aging, individuals who took evidence-based falls prevention programs saw a 52% reduction in the number of falls. So that is a $250 investment in prevention that can help an older adult stay independent, connected, and out of the hospital.
So let me ask you a question. Would you take the financial risk? If I went to Mehmet Oz, who's running CMS, and said, Medicare, you pay for this program, or Medicaid, whatever, and then if it doesn't save that amount of money, you have to give the money back. Would you guys all do that? That's what I'll do it, right? You take that financial risk, right? It doesn't make sense. I mean, as a business guy, I would do that in a heartbeat, right? To save the money. I mean, it's not just saving the money. You change people's lives, right? Okay. If any of you want to do that, and you give me something, I'll take it to CMS, and just try it in your just try it for your whatever you're responsible for, because they have all the the data, right? They know what they've been spending. So you could do a program. They know exactly what they're spending on this. What we have to file for Medicare is pretty specific, so you know exactly what that is. You know what this costs. And so you ought to just take a portion of the savings. So, okay. All right, Mr. Dion, area agencies on aging receive a mix of federal, state, and local funding, and they operate within a significant amount of federal regulatory and reporting overhead. I bet you love all that. How much of your staff's time and your organization's resources go toward compliance and paperwork rather than actually serving seniors, and what federal requirements could be eliminated or streamlined without reducing outcomes? Just so you know, when I was governor of Florida, first I was a business guy. You know what you got, as a business person, you know what you get frustrated with? Government. And crazy, stupid government regulations. So I'm sure that never happens to you, right?
Oh, no, not at all. No, and I do have to brag about our area agency on aging. The great thing about the Older Americans Act and setting up that aging infrastructure or network is that there is a constant feedback loop of monitoring and fiscal responsibility and programmatic responsibility. So to an extent, that having that regulation and having that follow through is very important, because that's how we know that things are doing what they're supposed to be doing and that it's working for seniors. We have gone 17 years, my particular area agency on aging has gone 17 years from the Florida Department of Elder Affairs not having a finding, so we are all too familiar with being in compliance, following those regulations when we are monitored by our state unit on aging. So all that to say, especially on the evidence-based side, it's actually very important that we do follow that regulation, again, for those specific evidence-based programs, because that's how we know that those programs are working. Like my colleague said, those evidence-based falls prevention programs result in a 52% reduction in falls. And in addition to that, there is a 58% reduction in falls that result in serious injury. And we don't necessarily have to keep tracking that after every matter of balance class, because that evidence-based programming tells us that that's what that programming does for us.
Have you ever gone to a Medicare Advantage program and just asked them? Because they should pay you. I mean, if you can prove this, they should pay you, and you should take a cut of the savings. Because it sounds like every one of you can defend it, right? You should go to the Medicare Advantage, because they don't have to worry about what CMS does, and just ask them and go with a proposal of whatever a cut of the savings. They pay for your programs, and then you get a cut of the savings. So, I mean, if they don't, if they, it doesn't make any sense if they wouldn't do it.
Yeah. And if I can add, it's certainly important that there should be private investment in falls prevention, Medicare Advantage plans, private insurance companies. There definitely should be that private-public partnership. We do want to make sure that we're reaching all of those seniors and older adults, including the ones that just have straight Medicare. They don't have access or are able to afford those Medicare Advantage plans or other private insurance options. And that's why those public-private partnerships are so important. And like you said, there should be that investment on the
But you
private
should
side.
be able to make a profit. If you can save them that much money, you should make a profit off the Medicare Advantage that you can do the others. On top of that, if you give me the information, I'll see if I can get CMS to do a pilot with you that would help, make it happen across the country. So Florida's been a leader in state-level innovation on elder services. To what extent do federal OAA requirements and funding conditions constrain Florida's ability to design programs that fit its population? And would you support giving states more flexibility in how they use OAA dollars, even if it meant less federal prescription over how programs are run? I'll just ask you the same.
Thank
What do
you.
you think?
Yes, we would enjoy any kind of flexibility to be able to use funding to support seniors. But the main issue is that the funding is just inadequate across the board. It doesn't matter if we're shifting funding between Title IIIB supportive services to Title IIID preventive services, or from both buckets to Title IIIC nutrition services. In our area, in our planning and service area, we have over 7,000 seniors waiting for at least one kind or one type of Older Americans Act service, because we just don't have the funding to serve the need in our communities. So yes, while flexibility is always welcome, we really have to pivot and know what seniors need and where they need it the most to be able to help them. And again, that Older Americans Act really helps that holistic approach to preventing falls. It's not just that Title IIID evidence-based programming.
What I found when I became governor of Florida is a lot of the regulation is all put in because somebody did the wrong thing and took advantage of the program. Then everybody else pays for it, and then the consumer, whoever the senior in this case, gets less, right? So, Ms. Mitchell, predictive analytics are increasingly being discussed as a way to identify fall risk before a fall happens. How mature is that capability today in real-world deployment, and what would it take for that kind of tool to move from a premium product to something an area agency on aging could integrate into its program?
Right. So I think that's, what we're always going towards is being able to predict versus being able to just, assess based on what has already happened. So at Grand Care, we like to call our data that we receive, let's call it little data, right? So we're taking a Grand Care system and we're monitoring or we're managing somebody's chronic conditions. We're saying, okay, so if Jim has congestive heart failure, I want to know if Jim gains 5 pounds in 2 days because that's indicative of a problem, and I'm going to set up a clinical visit before that turns into a hospital admission. So obviously that's sort of predictive, that type of thing. Or I want to know if somebody's having a seizure, so I want to detect if there's wandering motion that occurs. I want to be notified so that I can go in and intervene before something else occurs.
Right.
So, that type of stuff exists already today. Some of the AI and predictive analytics, I think in my mind, it's, hey, so I want to know if Jean gets out of bed every day at this time for weeks and weeks and weeks, what happens if a month later now she's getting out of bed at this time? Or what happens if she used to get out of bed every night? We're pretty habitual creatures. So what happens if she gets out of bed every night, at 2 a.m. to use the restroom? Well, now she's using the restroom 3 or 4 times. That could be a UTI, that could be sundowners, that could be a lot of things. So being able to assess that information and comparing information from something that this person used to do or something that they're doing later is super helpful. What if my mom used to win at solitaire all the time and suddenly now on the system she's losing? Like all of those types of things, or it used to take her this long to play the memory game and now it's taking her this long. So being able to assess that kind of information, all of that information exists right now. We can take a look and see how many times they're playing games, which videos they're watching, how much they're video chatting with family and friends. Like all of that is just untapped and ready to be either put into, delegated into a greater analytic system so that somebody can create algorithms and determine, hey, we've determined that this person who is about to have a stroke, here is their motion patterns, here was their blood pressure, here are the amount of times that they use the restroom. All of that kind of information would be very, very exciting for us to know and in order to predict events, but also prevent them.
Makes sense. So, Ms. Mitchell, a lot of seniors and their families are enthusiastic about technology in the abstract, but resistant to it in practice, often because of privacy concerns or the perception that monitoring feels intrusive. How does Grand Care approach that tension, and what have you learned about designing systems that people actually use and keep using?
Yeah, I think that is a great question. And I often feel like older adults aren't scared of technology. I mean, this is a population that went from potentially walking to flying in their lifetime. And so it's not technology. They use technology every day. They watch TV. I mean, all sorts of different technologies. They've got fancy cars and fly and do all the things that we're all utilizing technology. It all comes down to the interface. So are we providing them with something that they feel is accessible, usable, and friendly to what their needs are and what they want to do? Or are we forcing them to use a technology like, here's my tablet, go ahead and use this, and it may have been not designed for specifically with them in mind. At Grand Care, we designed it initially in 2005 with the older adult in mind. Now we also have individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities that we also work together with. So we've designed for both populations. And it really is designed so that an individual who can read or look at pictures or touch buttons can participate with. We've had folks that are in hospice that can't touch the touchscreen at all, and family members that live far away, like in hospice, you may not know necessarily how much time you have. So if you're flying in from another state, you may say, okay, well, for the next 6 weeks, I'm going to sort of be on edge and sort of wonder, but with a technology like this, I can video chat in with mom and dad. She doesn't even need to be able to touch the touchscreen. If I'm designated, I can drop in on that touchscreen and then talk and communicate and connect at end of life. So it's really giving those advantages over the disadvantages. It's really about somebody feeling more secure. And of course, we don't have any sort of access to remotely monitoring or assessing that ourselves. We provide it for the family members to be able to assess the tools and set up rules. They're not sitting there poring over the motion graphs. That would be very boring to look at motion graphs. But instead, we're just saying, if this happens, if there's excessive motion in the bathroom in the middle of the night for more than 45 minutes, I want to be notified. And in that case, I might be able to sort of support somebody. Is somebody sick? Did a fall occur? It's just an outlier that occurred. And so the idea is not monitoring. The idea is about providing independence and letting individuals be connected to family and friends wherever they want to live.
Ms. Pettis, YMCA's sit in communities across the country, including in rural and underserved areas where area agencies on aging may have limited reach. How are you thinking about the YMCA network as a delivery infrastructure for fall prevention, and where does that partnership with the AAAs work well, and where are the gaps?
Thank you. Yes, we are across New York State. We have over 140 different locations across the state, and we do work with our area offices of aging in many of those locations. And we see the use of technology really to expand that reach that we have to fill in those gaps, as you say, to meet those individuals wherever they're at. For our evidence-based falls prevention programs, we're not only offering them at YMCA facilities across the state, but we're also bringing those programs into other community settings, like senior centers, like libraries, or my favorite, we have a program happening at a Old Joanne's Fabric in a mall in upstate New York. So we are bringing those programs where the people are at. And then technology, like I said, is allowing us to fill in those gaps to reach those individuals who have various barriers, say mobility, transportation, or maybe they are caregivers themselves, so they're at home. So we are always about connecting with partners throughout the region because we know that we cannot do this work alone. So we are absolutely open to partnerships with the AOAs and others.
Well, first of all, I want to thank each of you for what you do every day. If there's any way I can help you in working with CMS or any of the Medicare Advantage or anything else, if you just let me know. Thanks everybody for being here today and participating. We've heard today reinforces something. What we've heard today reinforces something. I came into this hearing already believing falls are not an inevitable part of aging. They're a preventable crisis, and we have the tools, the programs, the knowledge to do something about it. I look forward to continuing to work with members across the island down the dais. If any senators have additional questions for the witnesses or statements to be added, the hearing record will be open until next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Thank each of you for being here.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today, I want to talk about a major bipartisan win for New York seniors. Every day, I hear from older New Yorkers who are struggling due to Trump's administration's recklessness. Over the last 2 years, cuts to Medicaid and food assistance have pushed many families to the brink. At the same time, rising prices on everything from groceries to gas are making it harder for seniors to put food on the table, fill their cars with gas, and heat and cool their homes. On top of the typical mobility and health challenges that come with aging, this is an extraordinary burden that our seniors are being forced to bear. One senior from White Plains told me that she's worried about having to choose between paying her medical care and paying the heat this winter because she can no longer afford both. Another woman, a 78-year-old widow from Duanesburg, relies on food stamps and Meals on Wheels to put food on her table. Cuts to these services would be absolutely devastating for her. These New Yorkers deserve relief. That's why I'm so proud to share that last week the Senate unanimously passed my Older Americans Act Reauthorization Act. This bipartisan Older Americans Act, or OAA, has been a lifeline for seniors since its passage over a half-century ago. It powers life-sustaining nutrition assistance and meal delivery programs that help seniors access nutritious, healthy food. It funds transportation services that help seniors get safely to and from doctor's appointments and the grocery store and community events. And it provides essential support for caregivers, giving the selfless people who look after their loved ones the tools and relief they need. The impact of these programs is astounding. Every year, OAA programs deliver over 250 million meals, provide more than 14 million rides, and offer 30 million hours of caregiver support and in-home assistance with daily tasks like bathing and dressing. In total, about 1 in 6 older adults across the country rely on OAA-funded services every year. As an added bonus, the OAA is incredibly cost-effective. By helping seniors avoid extended hospital stays and care in nursing homes, OAA programs save taxpayers billions of dollars every year. In fact, every dollar invested in OAA services generates over $3 in community value. However, despite this program's proven success, authorization of the OAA expired at the end of 2024. While this has caused limited disruption to OAA programs so far, it jeopardizes the program's long-term future. The Senate's passage of the OAA Reauthorization Act was a critical step towards guaranteeing that these services remain intact for years to come. Now, I'm calling on the House to take up and pass this vital legislation so we can send it to the President's desk as soon as possible. At a time when our seniors are struggling more than ever, we can't afford to take a step backwards. Our seniors have spent their lives building our communities, raising families, and serving our country. They have earned the right to age with health, dignity, and independence in their locations of their choice. I'm doing everything I can to make sure that the OAA Reauthorization Act is signed into law, and I will keep fighting until it is. Thank you. Happy to take on topics first.
How likely is this legislation to be passed in the House? How likely is it to be passed quickly in the House?
I'm optimistic. This is something that should be on their consent calendar, meaning everyone should agree to it. It is not divisive. It is bipartisan. And so I'm hoping they can get it done immediately.
Brian O'Neill.
Go ahead, Brian.
Thanks. Reading the summary of the Protect Older Americans Act, somewhere in it talked about age discrimination. Wondering, has this law helped senior citizens win age discrimination in court, court cases on that?
So we have a separate bill to change how age discrimination cases get adjudicated. Right now, when you sign an employment contract, you're usually signing away your constitutional rights to a jury, and you have to have forced arbitration, and you have to sign non-disclosure agreements. We're trying to eliminate those things. And so I had a bill with Lindsey Graham, who just passed, but also Senator Grassley supports it, and a few other senators on the Judiciary Committee. So we're hoping to pass this provision as well, so it can be added to the Older Americans Act to actually make sure if you are discriminated against, you can sue in a court of law with a jury of your peers.
Were there things in contracts about people's age?
It just says if you sue your employer for any reason, that you have to do these mandatory arbitrations and non-disclosure agreements. So we want to have a carve out that if you're suing because you're being discriminated because of your age, that you get those jury trial rights back. So it's specific to age discrimination. But your employment contract just says any conflict with your employer, you have to go to arbitration. Arbitration usually helps the employer, and it doesn't have many, doesn't really pay you very well typically. The awards are very low. It's really designed for corporations and equally situated plaintiffs and defendants. They're not intended for someone like a senior who's suing because they've been discriminated against, where the balance of power is deeply uneven.
Thank you.
One more?
Can I do an off topic?
Yeah, you can do your off topic, yep.
The Canisteo, the town of Canisteo, it was announced yesterday that over $500,000 in FEMA funding is coming through for repairs because of the August 2024 Debbie flooding there. Was wondering if your office had anything to do with it.
Well, we did, because we've been truly advocating at the administration that they have to pay the FEMA money to blue states too. We have been on a rampage about this because we've seen FEMA money going to lots of red states for disasters, but not coming for blue states. And I think that statewide advocacy, along with all our federal partners and the governor, has been working. And I think they finally are realizing they can't play politics with people's lives when they've suffered these natural disasters.
Thank you.
Hey, Senator Brendan Scanlon here with WENY News and Lilly Broadcasting. I was wondering, wanted to get your reaction to the wildfire smoke and the impacts we saw from Canada, as well as President Trump threatening possible tariffs on Canada over the smoke and for Canada's, forest management on top of the tariffs on Canada that we recently saw.
So yes, the smoke was really terrible. I experienced it in upstate New York. I also experienced it in downstate New York. It really went across the whole state, and it did really reduce air quality for people who have breathing troubles, for our seniors, for our babies and young children. So it was quite dangerous. What President Trump is doing is illegal. He is not allowed to issue tariffs because he's upset about a wildfire. He's not even supposed to be the one issuing tariffs anyway. It's supposed to be Congress. So he's usurped the power of Congress to do what he wants to do. And 50% is really going to hurt New Yorkers because they're putting tariffs on food that we eat, on lumber, on the housing that we're going to build. The cost will rise for housing and food because of those tariffs.
Thank you. And if I may, one quick additional off topic on the Clarity Act. How are negotiations going with that? And might we see a vote in the Senate on that?
We don't know yet. The Republicans are supposed to release their draft sometime today. And we still have 3 outstanding provisions that we have to get included, or Democrats will not vote for this bill. We need an ethics provision to make sure members of Congress, the president, the vice president, and senior administration officials cannot issue any type of cryptocurrency or digital currency. 1, and 2, we need more consumer protections, particularly at the CFTC. And then last, we want to have some more rigorous criminal penalties for illicit finance. And so we're working on those 3 provisions. I'm optimistic that we can get consensus on those 3 provisions in the next week or so before the vote. But those changes have to be in the bill or it will not pass.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody. I have to go. But if you have follow-ups, just reach out to James. Thank you.